You're 25,000 feet above the German countryside. It's March 1945. You're a Luftwaffe pilot in one of the most advanced fighters ever built, the Messerschmitt Bf 109. You've survived 3 years of war. You know every trick in the book. Then you see it, a dot in the sky, growing larger. But something's wrong. It's not moving like anything you've ever seen. It's falling. No, diving. Faster than physics should allow. 7 tons of American metal screaming through the air at over 550 miles per hour. Your hand tightens on the control stick. Your heart hammers, because in that moment you realize something terrifying. The rules have changed. This is the story of the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, and the day German pilots learned they weren't fighting planes anymore. They were fighting falling anvils with engines. Let's rewind. 6 months. It's September 1944, somewhere over occupied France. Hauptmann Franz Stigler isn't his real name, but his account is documented in several post-war interviews. He's a decorated Luftwaffe pilot with 28 confirmed kills. He's flown against Spitfires, P-51 Mustangs, even the Russian Yaks. He knows fighters. On this particular morning, he's leading a flight of 4 Bf 109 seconds on a bomber interception mission. The briefing was routine. American heavy bombers crossing into German airspace, probably B-17s or B-24s. His job: break up the formation, take down as many as possible before the escorts arrive. Simple. Except nothing was simple anymore in 1944. As his flight climbs through 20,000 feet, the radio crackles, Achtung, Achtung, heavy escorts, many fighters. Stigler scans the sky. Then he sees them. Not the sleek P-51 as he expected. Something else. Bigger, chunkier. They look almost clumsy, like flying barrels with wings. P-47 Thunderbolts. He'd heard about them. The other pilots called them jugs because they were shaped like milk jugs. They joked about them. Too heavy, too big, too slow in a turn. Some American engineer's mistake wrapped in metal. Stigler smiled. This would be easier than he thought. He was about to learn the most painful lesson of his life. The thing about aerial combat is that it happens fast. 40 seconds can feel like 40 minutes. Your brain processes information at triple speed. Every decision is life or death. Stigler spots a Thunderbolt slightly separated from the pack. A straggler, perfect target. He banks hard right, diving to build speed, positioning himself for a classic tail attack. His wingman follows. This is textbook. At 400 yards, he lines up the shot. The Thunderbolt is massive in his gun sight. How can the Americans send up something so big? At 300 yards, the P-47 suddenly breaks. Not a gentle turn. A violent, wrenching snap roll that should tear the wings off an aircraft that size. But they don't tear. The Thunderbolt reverses direction like it weighs nothing. Stigler blinks. That shouldn't be possible. He pulls hard, trying to follow, but the Thunderbolt is already gone, diving away at an angle so steep it looks vertical. Stigler watches his target shrink, dropping like a stone, pulling away faster than he can follow. And that's when he realizes something that makes his blood run cold. The P-47 isn't running away. It's setting up. Here's what Stigler didn't know. What German intelligence hadn't fully grasped. What would change the air war forever. The P-47 Thunderbolt wasn't designed to dogfight. Not in the traditional sense. It was designed to do something no other fighter in the world could do. It was designed to dive. Not just dive. Plummet. Fall from the sky like a meteor while maintaining complete control. At speeds that would tear apart a Bf 109 or an FW 190. See, the P-47 weighed 17,500 pounds fully loaded. That's 7 tons, more than twice the weight of a Messerschmitt. It had the largest radial engine ever put in a fighter, a Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp producing 2,535 horsepower. And it had something else, something revolutionary, a turbo supercarger. This wasn't just an engine booster. This was a system that let the P-47 maintain full power at altitudes where other fighters gasped for air. At 25,000 feet, where a Bf 109 was struggling, the Thunderbolt was just getting started. But here's the genius part, that massive weight, the thing that made it look clumsy. It became a weapon. In a dive, gravity is your engine. A light fighter falls fast but loses energy quickly when it tries to pull out a heavy fighter. It builds momentum like a freight train, and the P-47 could dive at terminal velocity, over 550 miles per hour, and then use all that stored energy to zoom climb back to altitude faster than anything could follow. The Germans called it the boom and zoom tactic, but that makes it sound simple. It wasn't. It was devastating. Back to Stigler. He's just watched a 7-ton fighter drop away like it's in free fall. He's thinking he's safe, thinking he's won. The P-47 is running. Then his wingman screams over the radio, "Brake left. Brake left." Stigler snaps his head around and his stomach drops. The P-47 isn't below him anymore. It's behind him. Somehow, impossibly, that massive aircraft of 8,000 feet pulled out and zoom climbed back up in the time it took Stigler to complete one turn. The P-47E's 850 caliber machine guns light up. 50 caliber. Think about that. Most fighters carried rifle caliber weapons, maybe 20 millimeters cannons. The P-47 carried 8 machine guns that fired rounds the size of your thumb. Half an inch of copper-jacketed lead flying at 2,900 feet per second. Each gun firing 850 rounds per minute. That's 6,800 rounds per minute total. 113 rounds every single second. A wall of metal. Stigler throws his 109 into a desperate spiral. He hears the hammer strikes of bullets hitting his aircraft, his canopy spider webs. His engine coughs black smoke. He's pulling G's so hard his vision tunnels. But the P-47 doesn't follow into the spiral. It doesn't need to. It just pulls up, gains altitude, and waits, waiting for Stigler to run out of airspeed, run out of options, run out of sky. That's when Stigler understands. This isn't a dogfight. This is a hunt, and he's not the hunter. He pushes the stick forward and dives for the deck, his only chance. Trees blur beneath him. He's at 300 feet, 200, 100. His engine is dying. He's trailing smoke like a banner. The P-47 doesn't follow him down. It doesn't have to. It's already won. Stigler made it back to base that day. Barely. His 109 was written off. Two mechanics would later count 37 bullet holes in the fuselage. But the story doesn't end there, because what happened to Stigler was happening everywhere, all across Europe. The P-47 was rewriting the rules of air combat. Let me give you some numbers. In the European theater, P-47 Thunderbolts flew 546,000 combat sorties. That's more than any other Allied fighter. They destroyed 7,067 enemy aircraft. They also destroyed 6,000 armored vehicles, 68,000 trucks, 9,000 locomotives, and 86,000 railroad cars. Think about that last part. The P-47 wasn't just fighting in the sky. It was obliterating everything on the ground. Why? Because that massive airframe could carry bombs, up to 2,500 pounds of them. It could carry rockets, 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets. It could strafe. Those 850 cals could shred a locomotive, flip a tank, or reduce a convoy to burning wreckage. The P-47 became the ultimate ground attack aircraft. Luftwaffe pilots started calling it the fork-tailed devil. Wait, that was the P-38. No, the P-47 had its own nickname from the Germans. They called it Der Jug, not as an insult, as a warning. Because if you saw one, you were already in trouble. And if it dove on you, you were probably dead. But here's what makes this story really fascinating. The P-47 wasn't supposed to be this good. When Republic Aviation first proposed it in 1940, the Army Air Corps almost rejected it. It was too big, too heavy, too expensive. It needed a runway the length of a football field just to take off, early. Pilots called it a flying bathtub. The lead designer, Alexander Kartveli, was a Georgian immigrant who barely spoke English. But he understood physics. He understood that power-to-weight ratio wasn't everything, that energy management mattered, that survivability mattered. He built the P-47 with redundancy everywhere. Double fuel lines, armored cockpit, bulletproof windscreen, self-sealing fuel tanks. That massive radial engine could take a 20 millimeters cannon shell and keep running. Pilots reported flying home with cylinders blown off, oil streaming, metal shredded, and that Pratt & Whitney engine would keep thundering. There are documented cases of P-47s returning to base with 6 feet of wing missing, with tail sections shot away, with holes you could climb through. One pilot, Robert S. Johnson, survived an attack by an FW-19 that hit him with over 200 rounds. His P-47 was basically a flying colander. The control stick was shot in half. The canopy was gone. He flew it home, landed it, And after the mechanics finished counting holes, Johnson looked at his aircraft and said, "She brought me home." That was the P-47. It didn't just fight, it survived. Let's talk about the pilots for a moment, because the P-47 didn't fight wars. Men did. One of them was Francis Gabby Gabreski, a Polish-American kid from Pennsylvania who became one of America's top aces. He shot down 28 German aircraft, all flying the P-47. His tactics: pure Thunderbolt doctrine. Get altitude, spot the enemy, dive faster than they can react, fire, climb back up, repeat. Gabby survived 166 combat missions. But he always said the same thing in interviews. The P-47 saved my life more times than I can count. It wasn't the fastest. It wasn't the most elegant, but it always brought me home. Then there was Robert Bob Hoover, who would later become one of the greatest test pilots in history. He was shot down over the Mediterranean in his Spitfire, spent 16 months in a German POW camp, escaped, stole an FW-190, and flew it too. Allied lines. After the war, he said the aircraft he trusted most was still the P-47. You could make mistakes in a Mustang, he said. The P-47 forgave your mistakes. And there's the story of Bill Overstreet, who was so low chasing a Bf-109 through the streets of Paris that he flew under the Eiffel Tower. Yes, under the Eiffel Tower, in a P-47, and shot down the 109 on the other side. These weren't just pilots. They were artists painting with physics and violence and courage at 25,000 feet. By early 1945, Luftwaffe pilots were facing an impossible situation. Allied fighters outnumbered them 10-1. Fuel was scarce. Training was minimal. New pilots were being sent up with 30 hours of flight time against American veterans with 300, and they were facing P-47s. Stigler, the pilot from our opening story, flew 15 more missions after his encounter with the Thunderbolt. He survived the war, barely. In a 1987 interview, he was asked what aircraft he feared most. The Mustang was faster. The Spitfire was more graceful. But the P-47, he paused. The P-47 was inevitable. You could fight a Mustang. You could dance with a Spitfire. But when a Thunderbolt dove on you, you just hoped you lived. The P-47 ended World War II as one of the most produced American fighters. 15,686 were built. They served on every front: Europe, Pacific, China, Burma, India, Mediterranean. They flew from carriers, from rough airstrips, from grass fields in Normandy, and after the war. They kept flying with the French, the Brazilians, the Bolivians. Some stayed in service into the 1960s. The last combat mission flown by a P-47 was in 1966. 21 years after the war ended, the Thunderbolt was still fighting. Here's what strikes me about this story. The P-47 Thunderbolt was never meant to be pretty. It was never meant to be the star. It was meant to do a job, survive, and come home. And it did that better than almost any aircraft in history. When German pilots saw that distinctive shape, that massive nose, those broad wings, they weren't seeing an elegant fighter. They were seeing something else, something that represented American industrial might, American engineering pragmatism, American overwhelming force. They were seeing 7 tons of metal that could fall faster than gravity should allow, hit harder than anything in the sky, and somehow impossibly survive damage that would destroy any other fighter. The P-47 wasn't a ballerina. It was a sledgehammer with wings. And in war, sometimes that's exactly what you need. Today, only a handful of P-47s still fly. You can see them at air shows, their radial engines thundering, that distinctive sound that once meant doom for German tanks and trains and troops. Old men who flew them stand on the flight line, tears in their eyes, remembering friends who didn't come home, remembering the aircraft that did bring them home. There's a restored P-47 at the National Air and Space Museum. If you stand close to it, you can see the patches on the fuselage where bullet holes were repaired. You can see the armored glass windscreen. You can touch the wing and feel how solid it is, how real. And maybe if you close your eyes, you can imagine what it felt like to be 25,000 feet up, to roll inverted, to push forward on the stick and feel 7 tons of fighter respond, diving faster and faster, the airspeed indicator. Climbing past 500, past 550, the whole aircraft shaking, screaming, and then at the last possible second, pulling back, feeling the G's crush you into your seat, watching the earth fall away as you climb back to the heavens. The Luftwaffe pilot was right to be shocked. Because the P-47 Thunderbolt wasn't just a fighter. It was physics made personal. It was momentum weaponized. It was the moment when aviation warfare changed forever. And once you saw one dive on you at 550 miles per hour, you never forgot it. If you made it home to remember, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into aviation history, hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories about the aircraft and people that changed warfare. Next week, we're covering the Japanese pilot who tried to ram a B-17 and lived to tell about it. Trust me, you won't want to miss that one. See you in the next video.